Hey everyone, this is Sam from WargamerOnline. So this is a new type of content for myself which I wanted to try. I really love the background and I wanted to share it with you. I like background from Horus Heresy, starting to read a lot more Age of Sigmar, and obviously there's a bit of 40k which I enjoy as well. This information is taken from the latest White Dwarf from Games Workshop, and it contains the information that I'm sharing with you today. Obviously when the Idoneth Deepkin book is released, it'll be full of information and even more details which will be useful for yourself if you're interested in the Deepkin. I'm probably going to get some stuff wrong or mixed up in this video, so if I do, please leave any corrections in the comments below, and if you have thoughts or ideas on anything in this video, please them below as well. So the Idoneth Deepkin, I wasn't really that bothered when they first came out, and honestly I liked some of the models. The turtle looks amazing, the characters look really cool. The normal infantry, we'll go into those in a little bit, wasn't interested, but now I've seen more pictures of them in the White Dwarf. I really like the look of the models, and the fact that you don't have to paint eyes is a good thing as well sometimes, because you don't have to spend as long on them. The background changed quite a lot. I mean, just reading into the stuff that was in the White Dwarf, I suddenly felt like they were a much better army. Not because the models obviously changed, they've been exactly the same, but the background was quite good, and they're more dark elves than high elves, and I thought they were just like a new sea elf creature-y sort of race, but they're very dark. They've got some really cool aspects to them, so I'm going to go through those today. So the Idoneth Deepkin, that's their name. The name actually means extreme seclusion, and they named themselves after that. They named themselves after fleeing Teclis in the realm of light. So we'll go through the background first of all, and you'll get a better idea of who they are, what they do, what their race is made up of, and obviously there's going to be more of that to come. So the backstory, so the end times, if anybody is completely new to Age of Sigmar, the end times is now called the world that was, and when that blew up, Slaanesh basically ate a load of elves. It was quite nasty. He devoured a bunch of elves, and the last of the elves to be eaten by Slaanesh were the worshippers of Mathland, who is the god of the sea, or was the god of the sea. He was eaten by Slaanesh and he was fully devoured, so he's gone now. So the last elves were the worshippers of Mathland. In the Age of Myth, so this is coming into the Age of Sigmar, the Age of Myth, Malarian, Teclis and Tyrion captured Slaanesh, and I think they locked him in a cave, or kept him there, and they extracted a bunch of these half-devoured souls from inside Slaanesh. It's pretty grim stuff. And the first of them to emerge were the children of Mathland. Obviously they were last to be eaten, so they were the first to come back out again. And Teclis basically claimed them as his own, and he remade them and called them the Sithai or the Scythai. No idea how to pronounce it. I'm going to butcher all of these pronunciations today, but we'll just have to get over it. So the Sithai, the Awakened, and he built a city for them to live in, and it was in the realm of light, which is Haish, or Hayesh, I'm going to call it that, and he taught them a bunch of magic. Obviously Teclis is a huge caster, he knows a bunch of stuff. In the end times he really became awesome. In the past Teclis was quite a crippled elf of the high elves, and his brother Tyrion basically looked after him as his warrior older brother sort of thing. I think he was older anyway, and Teclis was this crippled caster, and over time he became more and more powerful, could cast amazing spells, and basically fought head to head with Malekith. So he became a right beast towards the end of the end times. I'm not going to talk about his downfall, but it involved a lot of water, so maybe he had a little bit of a kinship with the worshippers of Mathland, which is why he claimed them as his own. If anybody did know the end time stuff, then you'll know about his underwater end, as we may say. So he built this city, he taught them magic, but these elves became fractious, they became withdrawn, they resented Teclis as well for his teaching them the magic. For some reason they basically went, we don't like you, Teclis. And Teclis gazed into their souls and he just saw shadow. So he expected light. He was like, these are Teclis elves, these are really cool, nice new fancy high elves, but no, they're shadow. And he basically shone this bright light of truth onto them and revealed all of their secrets, and a bunch of them collapsed into madness. The rest of them went, I'm not sticking around for this, and they legged it. So they fled the realm of light, and they fled Teclis, and they retreated to the seas and the oceans. After that, the Sithai, I'm glad I can get rid of that pronunciation because I don't need to do it now, they renamed themselves the Idoneth Deepkin. So that's the extreme seclusion. They formed civilizations in the deep, and all the hidden areas of the seas, so in the oceans and the seas around the realm of light. And I imagine they went off to all the different realms as well, using the hidden gates. And obviously they're building up these civilizations, but as the first elf children were born, they realized their souls were contaminated and they were cursed, probably because Slaanesh feeding, you know, on their souls probably had some sort of an impact on them. And obviously a giant, massive, horrible chaos curse was the result in that. So only one, or barely one in every 100 elves survived infancy, which isn't a great thing, you know. Very low mortality rate, it's not good. And to stop the race from dying out, they had to find a cure. No idea how they found this cure. I'm not sure what trial and error happened for them to get to this sort of cure, because they basically capture creatures and transfer their soul essence over to the soulless elves in order to keep them alive. So these soulless elves are called the Namari, the Namarti. And the process was called soul binding. So they basically gather up a bunch of creatures, and I don't know if it's got to be like, you know, they could just go up into the forest and capture a load of boars and then take their souls and put them into the Namarti, and then they're all good for a couple of months. Or they have to go and fight bigger things like orcs or undead. You know, can they take a soul from the dead? Maybe not. Maybe the dead are exempt from it, but I don't know. There might be more of that in the book, but they basically have to capture a bunch of creatures and take their souls. Pretty nasty stuff. It's nothing that a high elf would have done. Certainly more akin to the Dark Eldar, but probably less torture involved. It's more just taking souls for their own survival. So they've done that. It doesn't fix the curse. It only sustains them for a short time, so they need to constantly get souls, but they have to constantly get the soul essence to sustain their race. And that's basically why they're doing it. That's why they have to form these raids to go and take the souls to keep their race and their armies and their civilization alive. And the ones that are responsible for that task are the ones that do have souls. So out of all of these 1 in 100 that survive, the ones that do have souls, they're split up into 2 castes called the Achillean and the Isharan. And so there's 3 castes in total. There's the Achillean, the Isharan, and the Marty. And 2 of them have got souls. So we'll go over briefly, well, kind of more than briefly, we'll go over the 3 castes and what they do and what they're like. So the Namarti, we've already said they're the poor unfortunate elves born without souls, and these form the majority of the race, and they become the labourers and the warriors. They do all the sort of dog's body jobs, the stuff that nobody wants to do, like cleaning the elven toilets. These Namarti, not only are they born without souls, they have to do all the really rubbish jobs as well. And the ones which are more apt to being warriors, they're trained by the Achilleans as thralls, and they formed into battle cohorts, so big legions of Namarti. And they fight proficiently with either long-handled Lanmari blades or the whisper bows, depending on, you know, what they want to use on the day. They'd probably wake up and decide, today I'm going to hit things with a sword. So they pick up their Lanmari blade and go and kill stuff. And they use enhanced sensors to track movement and the slightest change to current or pressure in the ether around them. So they're blind. They're born blind. They've only got little bits of skin over the top of their eyes. It's pretty grim stuff, and they have to use their sensors to shoot a bow and kill things, but luckily they're quite good at it. I imagine they're like bats, kind of, mixed with sharks. I don't know, they've got some sort of weird thing going on. The Namarti, they're born obviously blind, they're pale skinned as well, and they're doomed if no soul binding takes place, so they've got a pretty bad time as it is. Even with the soul binding, they sometimes don't even live longer than 30 to 40 years. So the best case scenario, 30 to 40 years, not great. And this is partly why they allow their lives to be used as the frontal assaults in battle. So when they go to do all of these raids, the front line is Namarti, and they're obviously pretty upset about that, but they don't really have a choice, because if they don't do the raids, they don't get the soul captures, which means they die even earlier than if they die in a frontal assault. And the other 2 castes, the Achillean and the Sharan, they can't be on the front line because there's not enough of them. So they basically can't be on the front line, so they have to take the Namarti for this. The soul binding process, so the actual, when they're doing all of that, it leaves them physically scarred, and they brand a half soul rune onto their forehead, which is why if you've seen the models, they've got like a weird looking rune on their forehead, and that's to brand them basically and show that they have the half soul, as if it wasn't obvious enough with their pale skin and no eyes, but whatever. And they've got a metal collar around the neck, and that probably only helps to unsettle any enemy they go up against as well. It looks quite cool. The models have got some really nice robes, some nice armor, they've got their collars. They remind me of the Adeptus Mechanicum, the priests, tech priests I think they're called. They're very similar to that, you know, pale skin, weird looking eyes and collars and stuff. Maybe a similar sort of design concept. But overall, the Marty are pretty cool. The pictures in the White Dwarf are much better than the pictures or the images from the video, which was released a few weeks ago. And there's some really dynamic poses on them as well. So I'm looking forward to probably pick up at least a box of them just to do maybe a tutorial or two on them and do different color schemes, because they're quite impressive models. The next of the casts is the Asharan. And these are the Masters of Magic within the Deepkin. So this cast of elves are identified at birth by a soul scryer, and that's one of the type of magicians or wizards that are in the Isharan ranks. And they're identified by their natural aptitude for magic, and they spend years learning how to harness it best. So each Isharan specialises in a school of magic known as a sphere, and basically there's a bunch of different spheres. I'll go over these anyway. So there's some which are rarely seen, and these are kind of behind the scenes sort of things back at the cities, or stuff that isn't really going to be used in battle, although you could theme this in your army as part of it. So there's and then I'm going to butcher these, there's the True Heas or True Heas, and they use powers to heal. So they're the healers, they're the doctors of the army. There's the Embalers, which I really like the idea of these, and they tame sea creatures. So they might tame the eels or the sharks. I forget the names at the minute, but I think it's an Alopex, that's the sharks. And there's something eels, and they tame these creatures for the Achillean princes, or the warriors that we're going to get to in a minute. They tame the sea creatures for them to use in battle. There's the Corylus, and they create the underwater cities. So using their magic, they just create big cities using magic, which is quite cool. And I keep imagining like an Aquaman theme to all of this, with these giant golden buildings and stuff which are all underwater, covered by like veils and things. They look quite cool in my head. I don't know if that's the case in the actual background. So that's the ones that you don't see very often. Then there's the most prevalent and probably the most important ones, and they're the soul spheres. So there's the soul scryer, and these act as priests as well as navigators. They can sense souls at great distances, and they allow the Idoneth to use whirlway portals and plot courses to lands that are full of souls. They basically, they go, there's a bunch of souls over there, we're going to go over there. And then the other wizards allow them to do that. And one of the spheres is the Tidecasters. So they can harness the elements. They allow travel across the oceans and the ability to launch soul harvest raids without warning. So they can basically just turn up, destroy an entire army, and then disappear again before anybody knows it. And they're able to control maelstroms, tidal waves, and the ether sea. And that's the thing that allows the aquatic beasts to fight away from the oceans. So when I first saw these models, I was like, why are all these sharks and turtles and fish flying around in the sky? It doesn't make any sense. And I couldn't think of a way why how they could even do it. How you could get a seafaring race into a land. Like, imagine fighting in the middle of a desert versus someone dead or something. How are they even there? More importantly, why are they there? The death don't have souls. They've basically covered that by using these Tidecasters. So they basically bring the ether sea with them, and it allows them to float around as if it's the sea. Quite cool. One way around it, and probably the only way around it, to be fair. Then the next ones, they're called the Soul Renders, and these have got these are really cool actually in the artwork side of things. I don't know what they're going to be like in models, but they've got the task of hunting down and stripping the souls from the strongest foes that they're up against. And they've got these really cool weapons called the Talon Hooks. They're like giant halberds with like reverse hooks on them. They look pretty, you stick it into something, it will die, and it will probably tear apart as well. They also have this really cool lure. It's called a lure light, which dangles from the helmet, and that lures souls of the fallen towards it, and then they can capture it, and they can basically gather them all up. If you think like an anglerfish, if you just type on Google anglerfish, and they're in the depths of our oceans in our world, they've got these cool little lure lights on the end of their heads, which basically lures fish to them and other creatures and things so that they can kill them in the ocean, and that's what these soul renders have got. They've also got an ability where they can reinvigorate fallen Marty during battle, so I think that's like an added party trick that they gave them as well. Then lastly for now we've got the Soul Wardens. So they are basically administrators and vault keepers. So they've got the duty of tracking and alerting the elders whenever a raid is required. So they keep track of the amount of souls they've got. They count them up and they go, okay, we need to get 10,000 souls to just keep our army intact. We haven't got 10,000 souls. We need to at least do 2 raids today, please. So they put KPIs and targets on the rest of the Achaelians. The Achaelians don't like the Soul Wardens because they're like, oh man, you're making my targets higher. But they go out and they do it because of it. And they basically have these giant vaults where they store all of their souls rather than treasure or artifacts. So pretty boring job. It's a lonely job, so the Soul Wardens get pretty lonely. Most of their time is spent in the cities rather than on the battleground, fulfilling their roles. But they do get really cool familiars, and they keep them company. So they get these things called Octars, which are basically octopus friends, and they just sit with the Soul Wardens and keep them company. That is the Asharim. So quite cool. Magic stuff. Loads of it, and they've got souls, so they're better off than the Marty anyway. The final cast are called the Achaelians. So these are, they spend, kind of like the Isharan, they spend their first years learning how to cast and which sphere they're going to go into. The Achaelians spend their first years learning how to fight, how to do great strategies, and how to command the cohorts of warriors and the leadership skills that are going to be involved with that. And that's basically their job. So they're strong, they're proud, they're noble, and they're probably the closest you're going to get to an ancient elven knight of the world that was, or the old world. So if you think of the old dragon knights and things from the High Elves, these are basically the equivalent in sea versions of them. Now their first job role, their first job posting, they get put onto giant sea creatures known as Leviathans, and this is only some of them. Others will be just kind of in the barracks learning stuff, but some of them go on the back of these giant sea turtles called Leviathans, and it's kind of like having a paper round, but with the you know, a bit of extra added danger. Obviously not as much, because paper rounds are dangerous if you've ever done one. They will man one of the razor shell harpoon launchers on the back of these giant turtle things. Bond beasts they're called. So they basically sit in the back, they man the guns, and they shoot stuff whenever they're required. And with the hopes of one day they can be promoted to a Mahar commander. So they're the ones that ride, or they you know, they hold the reins to these giant Leviathans and they guide them through the oceans. And the commander of their very own Leviathan. It's like a giant Ferrari but scaly. They actually have to put blinders on the front of these poor little turtles as well, so they don't, you know, rebel against the elves, which is quite nasty. Kind of, I don't like that part. I think the turtles should work with them. You know, they're called bond beasts. They shouldn't have to be blindfolded at the same time for them to rebel. But whatever. More on that in another video probably. We'll have we'll have Leviathan rights videos or something. So the other things that these can ride, so the Achaelians, they also get Fangmora eels, which are giant, long, snaky eel things with, yeah, they're quite cool to be fair. I wasn't too bothered. The ones I wasn't bothered about model-wise was the Alopex, which are the giant sharks. But they're growing on me, you know, these wizards have to tame these beasts for the Achaelians to ride. It's very rare for them to do it because they have to make them bondable. I don't know if that's like from Avatar or something. They have to bond with their creatures, maybe, I don't know, it's a bit dark. But they get Alopex, Fangmora eels, or you know, seahorses, which we'll go into. They're called Deepmare. So some of them, the Achaelian kings and queens, very similar to the you know, the High Elves of old again, with the princes and things like that. They get the pleasure of riding Deepmares into battle, and they're basically unicorn seahorses. Quite cool again. And these are really skilled, so the kings and queens of the Achaelian ranks, they're going to be the most powerful. They're obviously going to be really good in battle. They can use swords and shields and whatever, spears, they're really well. But they're really good at leadership, they're really good at strategy. They're literally at the peak of the Achaelian warrior cohorts, and I think they only really refer to the elders. The elders and the Isharan basically do the diplomatic side of things, and the Achaelian kings and queens get control of battle and raids and all that sort of stuff. So that's the Achaelians. Now, the other model that people have seen are these giant sea-cloaked hero-looking dude. And they look quite cool, and I at first thought maybe that's Teclis, but it isn't. So Mathland, the god of the sea in the old world, created using the souls of departed elves. So when the elves die on the battlefield, the souls can all be gathered up and they're drawn together, tiny little beacons of their ancient memory of Mathland. So they don't know Mathland, obviously some of these are just born recently. But from the ancient combined memory, they can create a version, a manifestation of Mathland, and it's called an Eidolon of Mathland. And there's two different forms of this big character where it can come out, and it could be basically in the form of a raging maelstrom, so tearing across the battlefield, ripping things to pieces. You think like the Achilleans, but a god version of that, just tearing things up and destroying stuff. Or it can sometimes be in the form of a support Eidolon, so it can enhance your army, so it'll bring strength and courage to all of your allies. But the flip side is it can debuff the enemy, so you can put enemies to sleep into comas, basically deep, endless sleeps. So two forms. It'll be interesting to see what the rules are like for that, but again, quite cool. It's almost like the Catan from the Necrons. You've got these shards of Mathland. It's not Mathland, it isn't the god, because that would be really powerful, and obviously we're waiting for Malarian, he's the only true god that we're going to have back. But the Eidolons are basically mini shard versions of them called Eidolons. So the next bit basically is the Enclave. So these are kind of like chapter tactics, or you know 40k if you have Space Marines split up into Imperial Fists or Ultramarines. The Enclaves are like the different versions of them, so the different chapters, or put it in Age of Sigmar terms, you've got chambers for the Stormcast Eternals, and they've all got different ones, and they're split up into enclaves or enclaves in this. Each one of these enclaves have their own underwater city, or it could just be like a cave where they all live in. And some of these are made up of giant great cities on the back of sea creatures. So you could have a giant turtle floating around the Ether Sea with a city on the back of it, which is quite cool. And each of these enclaves has got a ruling council, and they're made up of Isharan and the Achillean elders. And between that council, they decide which is the best path to follow. So it could be a complete focus on war and soul rending and gathering up soul essences, or civilization building, where they still need the souls and stuff, but they get the souls, they get back, they build the civilization, and they keep to themselves. Or complete deep isolation in the depths and reclusivity. So they'll still need some souls to keep the elders and some of them alive, but they don't need as many because they're not going to be going and doing raids as much. They just want to keep themselves to themselves, ignore everything. And sometimes it will just be a mix. So depending on which enclave you do, there'll be probably different rules involved and different units that you'll have. Obviously, if it's going to be more of a reclusive and an isolated enclave that you're doing, it will probably be more elite and less Marty filled armies, whereas if you want to do like the full war based enclave, then you will fill it with Marty. You'll be aiming to do an army which is just constantly raiding and trying to kill as many things to get as many souls as possible. So overall, in my opinion, the Idoneth Deepkin are very cool. They're a really cool race. They've got a very dark and disturbing past or background, and that's mainly thanks to Slaanesh, but also probably due to a bit of the dark trial and error in the hunt for a cure to their curse. The models are amazing. The enclaves and the structure of the army, you can do a lot of theming, basing your force around one sphere of magic, or create a powerful, like a warrior cohort led by an Achillean king. And he's got like the leadership and the battle skill of a true hero sort of thing. So you could build a force consisting of the Imbaler, the sphere wizards, so they tame a bunch of sea creatures, and then you have a bunch of knights on sea creatures to use in soul raids, so you could base it on that. So there's plenty of options that you can do within just this small fragment. I mean, this is taken from a White Dwarf. When the book comes out, there's going to be tons more background. You'll be able to know a lot more than what is in this White Dwarf. And this is just a snippet, basically. I'm really impressed with how much information is in this tiny, like, 4-page stint for the Idoneth Deepkin, and how much it's revealed for them, and how dark they are, and what they're trying to do, and why they're trying to do it. It's really cool, and it's brought another part of the army rather than just models. It's made me look at them in a completely different light. So I hope this video has been useful in some way. I literally didn't care for this army until I read the background, like I said, and now it's a contender for one of my favourite armies, especially in backgrounds anyway. Let me know in the comments if you're going to be starting an Idoneth army, what you will base it on, what are your favourite models, and how will you paint the force. Better yet, you've also got the forum. Phil always tells me to talk about this, and I should do really, but we've got the forum, It's awesome. You can put your own project loggers up on there. So if you haven't got an account, make a free account on WargamerOnline.com. Go to the forum link in the links bit, and you can create a painting log on there, and you can show everyone your progress. So if you're starting an Idoneth Deepkin army, or even if you've got any army that you want to show off, just make a free account and start posting up on there. There's some brilliant administrators, some brilliant viewers and members which are on there that all interact with you, so it's worth doing. And other than that, thanks for watching. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments if it's worth me doing these sort of things again, because I can put a bit more time into this sort of thing and go through some of the books in the background and put these videos out. If you do enjoy it, please hit the like button, and if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe if you haven't already. We do appreciate every viewer that takes the time to watch our content, and we're almost up to 10k subscribers, which is quite a milestone for us. We're quite happy with that, and we're just bewildered really that so many people still watch our stuff, so thank you to everybody who does. Other than that, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.